All right. Good morning from the sunny Melbourne.
Good morning.
Good morning. It is 10 a.m. here, and who knows what time it is around the world. We have had so many people interested in this session that we tried to time it in a way that everybody can participate. But if you can't because of the time zone you're on, this will be available as a recording. So welcome again. Today I have a real privilege of talking to our star employee, Tatum Spicer, who you can see on the other screen. Tatum's been with us for about 6 months, so not that long, but she's made a really tremendous contribution to the company. And we'll explain to you why in a moment. But firstly, I wanted to address a couple of things about why, firstly, we're running with this topic. So probably around 60 to 70 of our clients are people with Polish Jewish roots. And the types of questions we get are common. And they do relate to the history, to the background, to a bit of negative space around, Polish Jewish issues. So today we'll be able to clarify it all, I guess, hopefully to some extent at least. And of course, if anyone has any questions or wants to reach out to us directly, you can. But the first thing I wanted to say, second thing, third thing, I've been talking for a while now, is just a little bit of background. So Jews have been living, working, and coexisting, I guess, in Poland for centuries. So it was at one point one of the only European places that welcomed Jews, when they were persecuted elsewhere. And prior to the war, to World War II, there were 3.2 million Jews in Poland. So that's a very big number. That was about 10% of the total population and the largest Jewish diaspora in the world. But of course, what's happened during the Holocaust meant that, most of them basically were killed. So just after the war, it is estimated that around 300,000 Jewish people returned to Poland or survived in Poland. And many of them returned just for a very brief period of time and went elsewhere for all kinds of reasons, but mostly they returned to check for survivors, and because they had opportunity to immigrate, they did. Currently, there's around just under 10,000 Polish Jewish people in Poland, so not very many at all. But there is this, kind of a revival of Jewish life. Some people perceive it as a bit fake. Other people really embrace it. I'm one of the ones that really embraces it because I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to reclaim that space. There are hundreds of thousands of Jewish people going on trips, on holidays to Poland every year. And many of them do settle in Poland. Interestingly, Poland and Israel do a lot of business. Poland and Jewish people do a lot of business as well. But as far as citizenship, which is what we're talking about here, there was no Polish citizenship prior to 1918. And when the first set of laws were introduced in 1920, it meant that anyone, regardless of religion, background, heritage, that wanted to be Polish was Polish, including Jewish people. So that includes, a large percentage of the 3.2 million people that were settled in the pre-war territories. Tatum, tell us a little bit more about yourself. What do you do at Polaron, and how do you work with people that have Polish roots that are of Jewish background?
Hello, thank you for that introduction, Eva. So at Polaron, I work in the sales team. So we basically deal with the new inquirers who might be interested in Polish citizenship or simply just want to learn more about the process, and I engage with them. I learn about their family history, whether sort of on a very superficial level or more in depth. And basically get a sense of whether they might be eligible. I engage with them over the course of quite a few weeks before getting a family tree or some documents back from them. So it's a really wonderful engagement, and I really love connecting with people. In terms of inquirers or new clients that have a Jewish background, I guess for me, like being Jewish myself and having Polish heritage, I guess it's especially meaningful, and I'm able to, I mean, oftentimes I'll be talking to someone who's on the other side of the world and it's a completely different time zone, but they might tell me something about their Polish ancestors that is so close to my own personal experience. So it's equally meaningful and rewarding. And I think I speak Hebrew as well. And I think sometimes when I detect someone on the phone speaks Hebrew, and just having that connection and that mutual ground, I think it's just as special for them as it is for me. It helps in building that rapport. I think they're more likely to proceed because we've built that connection and they understand that it is meaningful. I mean, as part of getting Polish citizenship is basically learning about your own family history. It's sort of a component of the process. And I think everyone wants to know more about where they came from and who their ancestors were, their unique experience.
I think, Tatum, you work as part of a wonderful team with several colleagues across the world as well. And it's led by Emily, who has that sensitivity, I guess, or a way of training you guys to, not to make it transactional, I guess is the word, because it is a journey towards a passport, I think, at the end of the day. But there's so much more to it for everybody, and Jewish people included, because I think to some extent, I'll be very interested to hear your views. The journey is a little bit different. So could you maybe tell us why you think if you have Polish Jewish roots, your journey to a passport might be a bit different?
Yeah, absolutely. I think partly because I know personally, in my own case, the experience of Jewish people who were in Poland before the Second World War, during the war and after the war, they didn't have the most positive experience with Poland, and sometimes the remnants and the memories they hold in relation to Poland are quite dark and negative. So that might to some degree be passed down to their children or their children's children. But then when these new generations approach this process, I think it's a way for them to kind of reconcile that possibly and realize that just because of the negative experience, that doesn't mean that they're not worthy to go and get Polish citizenship. And in a way, it's a positive thing that they should be reclaiming that citizenship that might have been lost by their ancestor, that they have every right to want to take part in this society and build that connection. And I think it's a way to reconcile that former possible negative experience. And sorry, the question was in terms of...
Yeah, so what I was saying, and you've explained it beautifully, by the way, Tatum. And when we were preparing for the session, we did say, well, that's my personal view, that anyone that wants to go through this journey, I tell them to have an open mind.
Yeah.
And that is because if you approach it with preconceived ideas or anxiety, fear, whatever it is, or other people's experiences, is not going to be as good. So if you don't expect anything, you're going to be surprised in a positive way. So when we're talking about Jewish people that have Polish heritage, my question was about the difference. So you could, for example, tell us more about where we look for records, because one of the things you guys do in the citizenship team is, because we guarantee the outcome of applications, we do a lot of work prior to anybody even going ahead with our services, to try and work out, firstly, if they're eligible, and secondly, whether we can prove it, right?
Absolutely. Exactly that. I think what we were discussing before is the names, trying to work out the original name of someone's Polish ancestor is can be
like a puzzle
in itself, because oftentimes, obviously, they'll have a name at birth, and then as they grow up in Poland during the war, in displaced persons camp, post-Second World War, coming to America or Australia, their name might be anglicized. So it's, that in itself is really heartwarming, seeing all the different variations of the name. And also in terms of the online records, that, I mean, I love it. I love when I meet someone on the phone and they'll give me a few pointers about the names of their ancestors, and I'm able to find records, the immigration documents or census records, or just even their name on some list. And it might not be the most vital record, but even just to convey that to the inquirer, it always makes their world. And a lot of the times they're discovering new information that they otherwise had no idea about. I mean, personally, I'm now in the process of doing my own research on my own family, because I've developed these research skills through this job. And one particular instance which was especially meaningful was I was able to find a record which was between two agencies trying to link my grandmother with her mother because they were separated after the war. And just to see the names listed and these references to trying to link them up, which ultimately they did, they were reunited, and it was beautiful. And I shared it with my grandmother. I think she partly forgot that happened. So in a way, it's, you know, re-prompting her own memory of her childhood. I mean, she's now an older woman, so this is when she was 15, which is crazy to consider.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it kind of, you know, through your own journey, what you've just explained to us, I guess, is that it does enrich your life. So again, you know, people might start out wanting, you know, the ability to work and study in Europe, let's say. But there's so much more that they gain. You know, there's so many kind of secondary benefits which become primary in a way.
Absolutely.
Because I think for, you know, for many of our clients who go to Poland as Polish citizens and can walk in the footsteps of their ancestors, where I think earlier you were telling us about, did you look it up on Google Maps? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of my own independent research on so both my dad's parents were originally from Poland, my dad's mother from Narol and my dad's father from Stachowitz. So we spent a couple of weeks ago, I spent hours and hours just doing lots of online research, and I was able to find the address, the specific address of the town where my grandfather grew up with. He was one of 6 brothers, I believe, and then we were able to find it on Google Maps somehow, which is very complicated Polish spelling, and today it's a secondhand store. So the fact that you know this location exists, it's tangible. And the awareness that I could one day go to Poland and exactly that, follow the footsteps of my own grandparents. I mean, that's a priceless experience. And that's part of this process of getting Polish citizenship. It's not just a certificate, it's not just a passport, it's so much more all-consuming. It's such an all-consuming experience because you inevitably are going to learn more about your ancestors. You're inevitably going to get that stronger connection. For some people, you know, they come to me and they've already got a family history that their family put together, but for others, they know next to nothing. So presenting documents to them, presenting a narrative to them, I mean, it's just so heartwarming, and you can just tell from talking to them that it's something that's really impacting on them in a really emotional but positive way.
Pretty special indeed. So you've touched on a couple of points there when you talked about how we work, I guess, but could you maybe just take us through a typical journey of someone, you know, who's sitting at home, particularly now that everybody's in lockdown and an ad comes on Facebook or whatever, or they've heard from someone that they might qualify for Polish citizenship. What happens after that once they've connected with us?
So once after I've had the initial conversation with them?
Before you've had the initial conversation.
Okay, so they'll stumble upon our ad somewhere, and then they'll be prompted to possibly go onto our website. There'll be the option for them to submit a form, which just asks them some preliminary questions about their Polish ancestry, which also helps me, so that if they book a phone call with me, before I call them, I always read over their form. It'll tell me things like, you know, were their Polish ancestors their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, what records they might have when they left Poland. So it helps build up a picture in my mind. And then I talk to them, I get to know them on the phone. I ask them questions about their Polish ancestors, as much as they know, but not in a interrogative way. It's more, you know, just tell me what you know. We completely understand you might not know much. Also just a way to get to know them, get a sense of whether they're interested, answer any questions they have. And then before I end the conversation, I always say, let them know that I'm going to send them a family tree. And I really encourage them to work through it in almost like a cathartic way, you know, work through it with your family members. If you have documents, use the documents to fill out the family tree, and then also documents themselves. I give them a list of the types of records we're looking out for, with the awareness that they might have nothing. You know, I never frame it in a way that it's an obligation. It's more, if you do it, if you do, you do. If you don't, that's understandable. And then once they send everything back, we do an assessment, get a sense of whether they're eligible and the direction we're going to go in for their case, which family member we will be able to base their case on based on the records that we have. Then I get in touch with them again and let them know the outcome. And I find after that initial conversation, because they've seen that we've taken the time to get to know them and invest in their case, they're really engaged and they're really connected, and they know that this isn't, as you say, it's not a transaction. It's about building that rapport and demonstrating to these inquirers that we want to help them on this journey, because I do honestly believe that it is a journey. Because you're inevitably going to learn more about yourself, you're going to learn more about your ancestors, and it all comes together. It's beautiful in that way.
I think, you see, that's why people love working with you, because you're so passionate and so caring. And I think, you know, so am I. Like every time I speak to someone, I really and truly care about their stories, and I treat them with utmost respect, because for some people, there's a lot of emotions connected to their stories, to their journeys, and to their motivation as well. You know, I mean, let's be honest, you know, sometimes you hear things about Poland and Polish people that aren't that positive, and I tend to kind of go for it head on, and I acknowledge that, you know, it's a painful history, and you know, there are all kinds of facets to it and shades of how people perceive things, but you know, Polish citizenship for Jewish people is their birthright. They don't need to be worried about it. You know, often I get asked, oh, well, when my case is processed, is Poland anti-Semitic? Are Polish people anti-Semitic? And my very clear and direct answer is no. By the way, you can't talk about 38 million people in, you know, in general terms. Everyone's different.
Not. Yeah.
And compared to what? Compared to whom? And I think, generally speaking, Poles are very interested in Jewish history, in Jewish culture. It's present in the physical environment. You know, there are synagogues, there are Jewish festival. You know, so much happening in Poland in that regard. Yeah. But it isn't 100% you know, positive experience, and it's not that for, you know, all over the world. We just happen to be where we are, and there's not much we can do about it. But I think you know, clearly for Jewish people that have Polish heritage, most of them are eligible. And if they want to go through that journey, we will certainly support them. So, Tatum, you've mentioned the eligibility there. So the reason that I guess we engage with clients to that extent is because we need to understand it in a way that's very clear for us, and in a way that we can explain it to them, but also because we guarantee the outcome of the application. So when people go ahead with us, we need to be very sure that they're going to be successful, right? Yes. Could you maybe elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think people will have a misconception about confirmation of citizenship through their ancestors, and they think, oh, I've got a Polish great-grandparent, I'm automatically eligible. But unfortunately, it can be a lot more complicated than that. Things like the year in which your ancestors left Poland, if they left Poland before Poland was re-established in 1918, if your Polish ancestor was female and she married a man of a different nationality before 1951, if your ancestor naturalized in a new country before a certain year, if your ancestor served in a foreign army in certain year. So as you can see, it's quite technical, and there's a lot of legislation which is quite impactful on whether the citizenship was able to be passed down or whether it was lost. So it's like problem solving in a way. So that's why, even though I do talk to them on the phone and build up that picture and, you know, get those points, ultimately we do need to see a family tree, because that gives us a clear narrative in a very chronological order. And then when we do the assessment, exactly as you say, we want to deliver them an answer which we're 100% confident and sure about, because we're telling them, you know, you are eligible for Polish citizenship. So a lot rides on that statement. So we have to be 100% confident. And as I said, it's got nothing to do with their character. It's got nothing to do with the type of person they are, whether they are or aren't eligible. It all comes down to legislation ultimately, and you know, the terms and conditions of biography of their ancestors and what happened in specific years. But even then, I mean, sometimes we might just need to conduct research, and that in itself can be quite meaningful, because I'll tell the inquirer, you know, we'll initially need to conduct research to hopefully gather some vital records, but in that process, you know, we will be able to deliver you hopefully a series of vital records which tell you so much about your ancestors, and, you know, fill in the pieces of the puzzle that you might otherwise not know about.
I must interrupt, guys, because we receive a lot of questions, guys, and we're running out of time. So the first question will be, is this workable if ancestors left Poland before 1900?
Okay, I might step in there, Tatum, if that's okay.
Of course.
In a word, no, probably no. So that is because there was no Poland and there was no Polish citizenship. So the only exception would be, I guess, if people returned to Poland at some point or registered with the Polish consulate in 1920 when the laws were established. But it is a very difficult case. There's another avenue, which is grant of citizenship, that we often explain to people about. But confirmation of citizenship or pursuing it through blood is really, really, really extremely difficult if ancestors left before 1918.
Thank you, Eva. So we have another case. Nick is saying that my father left Poland shortly after the Second World War. He came through Israel to get to Australia. Does this disqualify me from being able to get my Polish citizenship, or do I still have a chance?
I knew somebody was going to ask that question. It's a very good one. Tatum, do you have an answer, or would you like me to handle that?
I might get you to respond if that's okay.
Okay. So the reason that this is an impediment potentially is because Israel had compulsory, and has still until today, compulsory military conscription to all towards its citizens, so men and women. But Tatum's already mentioned the law of 19th of January 1951 that changed it all. So it changed things like loss of citizenship for women through marriage, service in a foreign army, holding a public office in a foreign state, and a few other things. So what it all means is this, that if a man or one of your ancestors went to Israel before 1951, being Jewish, they most likely became citizen of Israel automatically. And in fact, what Israel did was backdated to 1948, when the state of Israel was established first. And it made them eligible for army service, which was compulsory, and that affects your Polish citizenship. So for a lot of people whose ancestors went to Israel before 1951, that's the end of the road as far as citizenship through descent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. And we have a question from Paul. He is wondering why Eva, or what Eva means by she guarantees the outcome.
What I mean is that you get your money back if you're not successful. It's that simple. So this is why Tatum and her colleagues take so much care in confirming all the information and also through documents. Because the thing is that a lot of people simply don't know. You know, they might know my grandpa was Polish, whatever. But until we've seen your family tree, until we've seen your documents, we might not be 100% sure that you're eligible. But once we are, all our paperwork reflects this. So your contract will include guaranteed outcome. If we fail for whatever reason, then we refund you the money.
How long does it take to process?
That's another question I'll answer, Tatum, sorry.
Of course.
Yes, look, it varies, but anywhere from 6 to 18 months, sometimes longer. Because what happens through this journey is that we often discover, and our clients discover things that they never knew about their families, including fake identities, including bigamies, including adoptions, you know, like the list goes on. And so there are sort of kinks in the journey. So when we start off, we might understand your family history in one particular way because we base it on what we know. And then through documentation, you know, the journey becomes more complex. So we have had cases that have gone on for years, or when they submit it to the Polish government might discover some information we didn't know about, or they might have certain questions which we cannot answer, and then it continues. But on average, you know, I would say 6 to 12 months from start to finish.
We might have one more minute to answer the question from DB. Do I have any options for citizenship if ancestors left before 1918?
I might give Tatum to answer that question just very briefly because I've been talking too much, I think.
No, that's okay. Again, because Poland wasn't established yet, it does make it a bit more complicated because the citizenship hadn't been granted to citizens until 1918. So oftentimes, if it's before 1918, we redirect the inquiry to the grant of Polish citizenship process. Do you want me to explain that process a bit?
Yeah, maybe just briefly. I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. So the grant of Polish citizenship process is more about the character and the profile of the inquirer themselves, as opposed to proving that direct lineage through documents. So it's a really wonderful process. It basically involves you as the applicant building a profile, possibly over the course of the year, where you demonstrate allegiance to the Polish community and the Polish culture within your own country. Things like attending cultural and community Polish events, learning basic Polish, attending, I guess lots of events that are run by the Polish diaspora in your particular country. You have to write some we have to write some documents where you explain why you want to become a Polish citizen, why it would be a meaningful experience for you. You talk about your own upbringing and if there were any elements in your upbringing that were, I guess, Polish in themselves. As part of the process, we do conduct research to try and gather whatever records we can on your Polish ancestors. Ultimately, the decision is up to the Polish government, but it is a really, not that I've been through the experience myself, but just learning about it, it seems like an all-consuming and really positive, rewarding experience that helps you connect with your heritage before hopefully going on to become a Polish citizen.
Yeah, that's beautifully put and beautifully explained. Tatum, thank you for that. So for those people that are interested in the process, I usually say 3 things. It's difficult, expensive, and no guaranteed outcome. And that is because it is assessed on merit, and it needs to be a genuine process. So there are people who just want to be Polish, and there's all kinds of reasons why. So if they don't qualify for citizenship through descent, we go on that journey with them. And it's a lot of work. It requires, as I said, genuine engagement and being connected to Poland in a way that's meaningful, specific, and it is a lot of work. But certainly feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. We've tried to cover just one little aspect of how we work. And Tatum, can I say a big thank you for being part of it? I was very excited when you said yes, because I think you have such a gentle way of dealing with people, but also such a good ability to explain things in a very clear way. So we're very privileged to have you on board as an employee, but also sharing your experience with people. And now when they ring you, they'll know who they're talking to, because it'll be watched all over. Usually we get several thousand people watching it afterwards. Tatum is just at the end of the phone, so am I. If anyone has questions, queries, let us know. And we can continue this conversation afterwards. But for now, I think we're out of time. Thank you, Tatum. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, everybody that's watched. And feel free to reach out anytime if you have questions.
Thank you, Eva and Tatum. This is part of our webinar sessions we're running every week. So please join us next Thursday, when we're going to talk about Polish history in the context of Polish citizenship. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.